And we need to start with our own texting, with our own Facebook accounts, with the things we choose to read and the things we choose to think. That we need to be respectful. We may not agree, but we can be respectful. And this degree of respect needs to be so profound that it opens the door to this experience of love your neighbor as yourself. I don't think if you don't respect your neighbor, if you say many things against your neighbor and disparage the way they are thinking or acting or who they are because of some reason you decided they are unacceptable, if you spend a lot of time on it, it's really hard to love your neighbor. And if you really don't love your neighbor, it's really hard to become the person you would like to be. Essentially, we are, in many ways, the out-manifestation of the things we think. And as we think ill of another, so we become toxified by those thoughts. We become influenced in our physical and emotional well-being, but also in the depth of our understanding of the nature of reality, our ability to become good seekers, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists. We become limited by this very act of holding disparaging thoughts about another. And if it's not enough for us, just think about it as a country. There are several countries in the Middle East right now who are tearing themselves apart. And it may be necessary, it may have been always coming, but it seems to me that it comes out of this idea that I'm right or I'm good and you're bad. So here, what we say is, I'm right, you're wrong. Or some of us say, I'm left, you're wrong. And so we need to be really alert at this point. Because the news is out that if you want to weaken the United States, the way to weaken the United States is to just have them fight among themselves, to do what they're already doing in the first place. One of the Swords and Beauties series that's on Netflix is called Britannia. And in Britannia, the story is that the Romans come and invade the island of Britain with 20,000 troops, but they don't fight anybody. They just are a show of force, and they start pitting the tribes against each other. And in due course, one tribe wipes out the other one, which makes it really easy for the Romans to wipe out that tribe. It is not the way to go. We must stand together, or we will surely fall apart. Or I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, this is a little extreme, I know, for a unity crowd. We must all stand together, or we'll all hang separately. Right? So let's do it. Let's deepen on how we get there. Let's talk about how to get there. So, I think most of what's happened to us, most of our prejudices come to us before we're even aware that we're gathering them. Many of them come to us as little children. Some by the time we're 20 years old, we pretty much have determined a lot of our thoughts about what's right and wrong. And in so doing, we kind of have limited the scope of people that are right, just by its very nature. And so we have within us the ability to change our prejudices and our what was thrown to us as children, what was given to us, the ideas of what is good and not good were given to us by our society and by our parents, by our religion. And much of what we learned in religion, when we get older, we go, really? So many of you are here as refugees from another place, right? I don't think it's exactly the whole story. It might be part of the story, but I think there's more to the story than that. Let me go find another way of expressing the divine. So you come into this place, we come into this place to learn, to practice, to be someone who sees God in everything. And this seeing God in everything is our goal, along with changing our identity, so that we begin to see ourselves as God. Not begin, but we see ourselves as God. We take the leap from I am this body and this mind and my personality, and we move to the level of knowing that you are it, the big it, all of it. And all that is, including your neighbor, is yourself. And as I see my neighbor, I see an extension of the divine, just as I am an extension of the divine, not some clay cookie that was dropped on a pan and fried to the right amount of, or baked to the right amount of cookedness and became a human being, a separate individual, but more another metaphor might be that we were water taken out of the hole, and it was formed into little cups of different shapes and frozen, and we became that. But when we melt, we'll go back to the one we were. Or we are light beams coming out of the sun. We're emanations of the very thing that we worship. We are that. We're not separate. We're not separate from each other. We're not separate from that. This is the goal of our coming together. This is why we have chosen to be here on a Sunday and any other day that we're here. We have chosen to see ourselves as an emerging presence of the divine, not as creatures who are sinful and who do not have hope, or have only hope if we hold a certain belief. Instead, we are emanations. And as emanations, we draw with us the same qualities of the divine. One of the qualities of the divine is unconditional love. Now, if you think about it, if God is so capable of emanating and emanating out as each one of you, would it not love you also as itself? Or would it not love its neighbor as itself? Would it not be the first expression of this phrase, love your neighbor as yourself? Because it sees itself in you. The divine, she, he, sees itself in you as its expression. So it would love you as itself, or as oneself, or as the divine. Now, if you took that thought, which can sound like only words, but if something allowed you to take that thought deeply enough, that you must be loved by the mere nature of your being part of the one, if you could let that feel in, you could feel into that. And there's an opening for a sense of loving yourself that might be deeper without it. And many of us block that feeling of love because we go, there's something unlovable about me, something unforgivable, something I have done or that I am shaped like in some way that has caused me to be unlovable. But if you're the emanation of God, how could you be unlovable by your shape? And if your God is so small as to think you could do anything that would offend her or him or it, I think it's time to think again. Think of the God that's large enough to create this universe. 13 to 15 billion years old, light having flown out from the center and is still flying out at the speed of light. Light has been moving at the speed of light for 13 to 15 billion years. How far is that? That's a big place. So big that I'm sure whatever you did doesn't count for much. Right? I've never really been mad at an ant for being cross with his brother. With sisters, I think, really. Right? Because we see ourselves as separate. And we see ourselves as so important. This I thought is so important. This is who I am. I. All the stuff that we do on the surface, we think that is who we are. It is very seductive thought. I was reading today of a man named Ramana writing, and Ramana is saying, thou shalt not commit adultery. Really, Adultery comes from the word idol. And thou shalt not idolize anything in this world. That when you have the need and the projection of that's your salvation or your happiness, you have committed adultery, essentially. And as Jesus said, and as he was doing a discourse on adultery, he basically said, it's not just the guy who did it, it's the guy who thought about doing it. And the reason is you're drawn from the self, from the recognizing who you really are, this whole and complete being, to one who is wanting something in this outer world that has drawn you away from your ability to pay attention to the nature of your depth. And it's brought you to the surface, and now you've hooked onto that. Just thinking about it, just thinking that that's the goal, you are lost. You've missed it. Come back to recognizing your inner self, your whole core, the depth of who you are. On the surface, we all look different, which is kind of fun. Nancy tells me she likes that I'm a man. How pleasant that is. Thank you. Because right at the moment, I don't have much of a choice. But, I'm just saying this is good. It's interesting. It makes drama. It makes experience here possible. It makes a much more fun drama when you realize that it's a drama and it is not the real thing. The real thing is what's inside. The real thing is the silence, the depth, the things that cannot be said exactly. So if any of you have been in a class with me, you know that I like to draw a circle and I draw a little triangle on top of the circle, and then I say, this triangle represents you, but the I part of you, the part of you that says I. So the first thought we have any moment is the waking up and the I thought, and then that cascades into I am the body, I am my thoughts, I am all the circumstances of my life, I am limited by what I am. That's the I thought. That is the ego being formed. It starts with the I thought, and then it grows into an ego, and it appears to be something really real. And so just as you think, this is who I am, it becomes really real until you withdraw your attention from it and pull yourself down and come back to the I thought and then break out into the magnificence of all that is without boundary. When you go back to that, then you realize that that was just an illusion. And so when they say the world is not real, that's what they're saying. It's an illusion from that point of view. This is permanent. This is what exists. And the work we do here, the reason we come on Sunday, as I said before, is so that we can come back to this realization. Because in the world that's started by the I, there is no enduring satisfaction. Or as Buddha said, life is dissatisfaction. Life is suffering. Life is missing the point. Until you return back to it. Come back to this. And the world will suck you out because of our habits of thinking so easily. Pull us right out there. We will adulterize ourselves with a million different things and think that is the answer. Anna had that great quote. The world of fear gives you things to want and to hold on to and the promise that you will be happy out there. That's the world of fear. The world of love pulls you into your heart, into this part. That's where we're headed. Here. And we will make a building which will pull you out of your center, I can guarantee you that. And we will make plans and we'll do all that stuff, all in the hope that in the end we build a community that is here to support us, to hold us, to pull us, to draw us, to encourage us to say yes when we make a step in the right direction, to be our support and kindness to bring us back into this place. And community in general is one of the big deficits in this country. You know, some countries have food deficits. We have community deficit. We live in a very mobile society, so it's not surprising that you would be away from your family. But we also glorify the individual so much that we don't really recognize and make the effort to make the community relationships that we need. We tend to hold back. I was talking to a woman from originally from Hungary between services, and she said, you know, I agree. I'm from another country, and the one thing I'll say about the United States, I've been here half my life, the one thing I'll say is very hard to build community here. It's very hard I tried to do it in my neighborhood, and most people said I'm busy, right? I don't know what we're busy for, but the levels of depression are pretty high in this country. The sense of loneliness is epidemic. It's time for us to come deeper and just find more friends. Nancy and I were walking yesterday in our neighborhood, and as we were about to approach a house, we saw this couple who had bought the lot next to us, and of course we were curious to see if we were going to have good neighbors bad, because we still judge them. And we go up and we start talking to them, and they seem to like the most delightful couple, and the guy has a restaurant, which already piqued my interest. It's like, oh, a restaurant, huh? So I said, I guess you're going to be inviting us over to big dinners and stuff like that. Is that right? He laughed, and we laughed about other different things. And it was one of those places where you just really, you could feel this was an open world, a happiness. This could be an improvement in our lives, even though this beautiful lot now might have a house on it. And you know how we are in America. It's like, ooh, I want more space around me. But this might turn out really good, which is kind of against my culture, right? Which is to say, give me mine and make it all mine, right? But and this couple's from Pakistan. So they could easily fall into the category of other, right? But there was nothing other about them, other than they had the lot next door. That was the other. This is our chance to open. And I realize I'm speaking to you so that I might get this at depth. I have 3 dogs. 2 of the dogs we got at the same time. 2 of the dogs always find each other's the attention the other one gets as really a cause to run over and to get in between, right? I don't know, y'all ever had dogs like this? But they, just as soon as you look at one, the other one will jump in your lap or come over and nudge you or something, right? It's a little irritating, I must say. And especially when I think that dogs are an expression of yourself, it's like, this is not good. This is so ingrained, so deep. So deep. And when things are really deep, you have to do things with it on the surface and things at depth to get it out. See, it must be overtly willing to look and see in another the good in them and not what's different or bad. To look for the good, consciously to send your mind out to go find what is good or what you like about them. Do that. And then on the depth, come back and reaffirm who you really are by doing your meditation, by doing your reading, by coming into this core of who you are, so you stop thinking that the surface is all there is to you and begin to feel, actually walk from, move from this place that I am that one, the one. This is the calling to go deeper. But until then, train your mind to look for what's good in a person, what's admirable, what's lovable, how we're alike, not how we're different. Right? That's the beginning. And then do your depth, become more. Because we choose here to be a light in the world, not to be more darkness. And that light needs to come shining brighter now than well, I don't know if than ever. I'd like to say that, but then I'd be talking above my understanding. Really, truly, we really need it now, though. Isn't that true? Don't we need to bridge the gap? We're doing this thing at 5:30. They've been doing it, Love in Action, where the whole conversation is about bridging the gap. And I'm going to do a class this week on forgiveness. And the whole thing is about forgiveness, which in large part is about dropping this practice sense of I'm hurt or I'm unacceptable, and seeing the depth, the truth of who you are. These are practices that we can do. And then I think, really, if we could have a more direct experience of the divine, then much of our faults will start to melt away on their own. You cut the root, and the vine falls apart. And the root is you believe you're separate from God and separate from each other. And to cut that root. See the depth of who you are. So last time I was here, we did self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is a fast method of getting there. So in this moment, just see if you can feel into your body and see that you have a body and it is a beautiful thing. And as the expression of that body, it is a beautiful thing just as it is. It does not need to be different to be loved. But even as you love your body, you also have a mind. And see that your mind may be filled with thoughts, some of which are productive and some of which are unproductive. And you have this mind, and it needs to be loved so that it might be transformed. But you're not your body and you're not your mind. If you can have them, they're not you. Even our language betrays that we are mind or body. We are not. We're more than that. Now let your hearts open, please. And as the heart begins to open, practice, please, extending your love to the people you love already. Send love to people that you just know. Now send love to those whom seem like your enemy. And now send love to all that is. To all that is. Ramana Maharshi said, we do not see God. When we are seeing God, we become absorbed. When that ice cube falls back into the water, it does not see the water. It becomes absorbed. Now, the one thing I think we need to add to this is a sense of joy and excitement about this process. For it is liberating. It is not only good, it is liberating. So let's be joyful. Let's sprinkle that in. And let's be grateful. And let it be so. So it is. Now I want to come back and talk just a minute. Your practice, whether you ever get to the final destination of realizing that you are the divine or being absorbed back into the lake as the water itself, your practice pulls somebody along when you do it. One of the things I wanted to say is that we're doing this, many of us are doing these Power of 8 groups, and we're praying for others. And in really praying for others, in that sense, as you pray for others, you take a step in the direction of the divine. Because you have become altruistic, you have become not self-centered. And you're moving in your deep intensity of wanting it to be a better for the person you're praying for. You move toward the divine because you're breaking down the I-other barrier. And in so doing, every time you do this, we take a step forward. And as we collectively, all 200 and some people in this congregation who are doing it, as we do that, we pull the train down the track a little way. And so our practice, whether it be solitary in the quiet of our room or together with 8 other people or more, this pulling ourselves along lifts us all. And so I would like to add to your prayer at the end of your prayers that you offer up each of your devotion, whether in the prayer by yourself or in these prayer groups, that you're offering this up for the good of all. Not just for yourself, because I think that's taking the poison along with the medicine. So you pray, you meditate, and you go, boy, I hope I got somewhere. It kind of defeats the purpose, right? We pray to liberate all others, and let's just practice making our prayer life, our life about liberating others. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, this is very common. It's a very common aspect of it, that may my merit be for all beings, is a common way of saying it. Something like that. Let that be part of us, because I do think, as I said before, isolation, self-centeredness, and the believing that the I thought, that I'm separate from God, is the source of the sadness, of the depression, and of the suffering. So if you could liberate yourself from that, you're almost home. So let's do that. Let's make our prayers for others. I'm not saying you can't pray for yourself, not at all. But let's say, may I do this, and may all my merit be for the lifting of all people. Okay. All right. We're also going to take up an offering. And